Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is another intro to React video. In this video, what I want to be doing is not using Create React App. Create React App is a tool that Facebook has created to make it easy to spin up a new React project. It's really actually built for production level projects. And the way you would do that is you would type in, so here I'm in a random folder in my terminal, and I would type in npx create react app, and then I would just type in the name of my application, so like project one. Okay, but if I enter that, it takes like about 10 minutes for that project to spin up. So what I've done is made a more stripped down version of create react app for the purposes of practicing and learning, called create react basic. So I'm going to use that, and it works pretty much the same way. npx create react basic, and we'll just call this project one. Okay, and what that does, and see, it cloned this project one folder. So here I have all my React stuff. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reopen my VS Code in that folder. So let's do that, project one. That way you can see here's all the files in that project. I am going to, and I'm using Visual Studio Code, if you can't see that I'm doing that. Okay, cool. So once I've cloned the template, the thing is that I still need to install all my dependencies. So I still need to run an npm install in that folder. And that's going to install all the dependencies. It knows what to do. Okay, and that's going to install everything. And there, good, we're all set up, we're good to go. So in order for me to run my development server, so my development server is going to be a Webpack server that's going to kind of automatically update as I make changes. I just have to type in npm run dev. And that's going to run the development server, and we see hello world. That's it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on this half of the screen, and I'm going to put this on this half of the screen, so we can see the difference. So first let's talk about the file structure and what React is. React is a front-end UI library. The point of React is to make it easier to build large, complicated UIs. So like your basic web page, like your friend's restaurant needs to display a menu, they probably don't need React. You can just make them a basic web page, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you get a little bit more complicated than that, maybe jQuery does the job. But when you're talking about full-on web applications where there's a lot of data, okay, it's very stateful, meaning there's a lot of data that's affecting how this application runs at any point in time, you're going to need something that's sort of very built to work with data. And that's where the big three frameworks come in: Angular, React, and Vue. In this video, we're talking about React. And so React is all about being reactive, meaning it updates when your data updates. So as the state of your application changes, the data of your application changes, it updates. And that's the beauty of React, okay? So that's essentially like why there's a lot of other cool stuff about it, but that's sort of the big deal. Okay, I'm going to minimize this for now. Actually, no, I want that smaller. Okay. Let's see if I can just, there we go. Okay. So you'll get this folder structure after cloning the project. Okay, this Webpack config, nothing you'll ever have to touch. Webpack is what's called a bundler. It's kind of the engine that makes all this stuff work. How does that all work? That's a different discussion for a different day. Don't worry about it. Just know that that's what's taking all your code that you're writing and like outputting a final version in the end. This README just kind of walks you through the template and what commands there are and what they do. Okay, package lock, that's a node thing that you never need to touch. Package.json, for any node project, there's a package.json file. Here's where you can find the scripts that I have for this particular project, although they're all detailed in the README, so you don't need to really read this. And then here are all the dependencies. So when I typed npm install earlier, it went into this file, looked at what the dependencies were, and downloaded all of them for you. But really, you never need to touch this file. Okay, git ignore, this just tells Git which things not to commit. So that way you don't end up committing things that just don't need to commit. So you don't need to touch that. This is Babel. Babel's a transpiler. It takes new cutting edge JavaScript and turns it into old browser compliant JavaScript. This is already configured for you. You never need to touch it. Okay, cool. So that's sort of the setup here. So really the only thing you ever need to touch is everything here in source. Okay, and the way this works, you can put your styles and styles.css, of course, and here's your HTML file in case you want to like put a bootstrap link tag or something. But essentially the way it works is that this div right here is the entry point for React, this div with the ID of root. In this index.jsx, what we do is we bring in two libraries, React and React DOM. Okay, React is the library that basically does all the stuff with components and state and props, all these different things I'm about to talk about throughout this video. React DOM is a library that takes something that's React, that's made with React, and injects it into your DOM, into your HTML. Okay, so we have an app component that's made elsewhere. We'll come back to that. So we're bringing in this app component. So you're going to see a lot of this importing of stuff. And we're basically saying here, and let me just move this over. What we're saying here is that React DOM, please render the app component where the element with the ID of root is. Okay, so if we go back to index.html, there's only one element with an ID of root. So essentially it's going to take that app component, which is just going to replace this. Okay, and essentially that's why app is called app, because it represents your entire application. Okay, everything starts an app and comes from app. App's the top of the pyramid. Cool. So that's essentially how React gets started. All we're doing is bringing in this app component and injecting it into that div. Okay, that's, you never need to change that. You never need to touch this file. Okay, so again, really the only place you need to work is here in the components folder, and that component that kicks everything off is app. So here we have the app.js. So here's your basic component, and I'm only going to be doing functional components. In React there are functional and there are class components. I'm only going to be talking about functional components for this video. But essentially the way a component gets created is first we have to import React, okay, because how else does it know that React applies here? And you just write a function, okay, and we're going to export that function. Okay, so I'm going to export const app. There's different ways you could write that, but that's the way I'm going to write it. Export const app equals prop. So essentially the basic what's going on here is we're declaring a variable called app, and we're assigning this function to it. Okay, and this function, as you see, it returns h1 hello world. Since when can you return HTML in JavaScript? That's never been a thing. Well, that's because in React they created this thing called JSX, okay, JavaScript extended. Essentially what it does, it kind of creates this new data type called JSX, which JSX at its core is really just HTML. You're writing little mini template snippets that are essentially their own pieces of data that then Babel will then translate into DOM stuff. So what we're saying here is that all the app component does right now is return this hello h1 with hello world, and whatever JSX the functional component returns is what gets rendered to the DOM. So what's the app component? Just an h1. Okay, so that's exciting. Okay, that sounds like a lot of work just for hello world. Well, let's start exploring cool things you can do with your components. Okay, so let's say we have a variable. So we'll say const hello equals hello world. So we have a variable in our function. Okay, so again, you still have access to your entire function. You can put whatever, anything you want can happen right before the return. So you can do whatever you want there. So hello, we declare a variable called hello world, and instead of typing and hard coding hello world, I'm going to use curly brackets and write the word hello. When this is compiled, what it realizes is that this is a variable. So it says this really, so that's what these curly brackets means. It means, okay, this is no longer just standard HTML. We're back in JavaScript world, and we're looking for a variable called hello. There's a variable called hello. So really what's going to show up here is hello world. So as you can see, it still says hello world. But it doesn't. You don't just use that with variables. You can also put in expressions. So let's say I wrote 2 plus 2 here. Okay, we should see 4 appear, and there's 4. Because what it does, it takes whatever JavaScript expression is within the curly brackets and returns whatever it resolves to. That's essentially what that's doing. Okay, you're going to get very familiar with that syntax as you use React. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Okay, now what's this props thing? Okay, prop stands for properties. Okay, or kind of like HTML attributes. So, you know, when you're doing like normal HTML, you might do something like this. You might say, okay, hey, you know, I have an image tag and its source equals HTTP whatever. So this is what's referred to as an HTML attribute or a property of the tag. Okay, we're going to be able to pass information to any of these components via a property like this. You know, basically where you have a name for it and it equals a value. Then it equals a value. So let's go back to our index.jsx. So see here, we're injecting that app component. Let me pass it a prop. Okay, so I'm going to just say my prop equals cheese. Okay. So see, it's just like that source property on the image tag. I'm just giving the property a name, and that property has a value, and which I can now then access from app. Okay, so I can go here and say, hey, now here's the thing. There can only be one top level. There's a bunch of rules of JSX that you have to follow. And one of them is that there can only be one top level element. So watch, if I did this, it's going to break. So if I go here, then I put an H2, and I say H2 props dot cheese, or actually cheese props dot my prop. Let me see how I spelled that again. My prop. So cheese dot my prop. Closing curly bracket. Closing curly bracket. Okay, that's should be breaking. So you see it's not updating because it's failing to compile. So you can see it says fail to compile here. The reason being is that, let's take a look at the error first just to get the point across. Okay, so see it says adjacent JSX elements, which means these can't both be on the same level. Okay, there can only be one top level element. So the easiest solution is just to wrap this in a div. Okay, so I'm going to wrap all the code in a div. So now the H1 and the H2 are both children of the div. And see, now we see it show up here. Okay, it now succeeds in compiling again. But problem is, like, if I keep wrapping every component in a div, you're going to have a lot of extra divs hanging around your DOM. So what a lot of people do is they'll use what's a built-in feature called a fragment, where you just pass in an empty tag like this. Okay, and that still works. So no div gets created, but you're basically fooling the React compiler and thinking there is this parent element. And now you can just do whatever you want. Okay, probably the easiest thing to do 9 out of 10 times. Okay, cool. So that's props. Okay, now let's create another component, because that's the beauty of React. The idea is that you can take your bits of your website and break them down into little mini chunks called components. So whenever we use the app component, this is what shows up. But let's make another component. So I'm just going to copy the contents of this file. Just makes things quicker. Go back over here, go in components. I'm going to make another file, new file. Okay, and they generally should end with JSX technically. So we'll call this other. This is another component.jsx. So technically app, this should be JSX as well. So let me just change that real quick. App.jsx. And then make sure this is importing app.jsx. So let me just change that to JSX so it knows exactly where it's coming from. There we go. Okay, and I'll adjust the template. Okay, cool. So I'm going to make another component in another file. And now I'm just going to change the name. We'll call this other. And this component, so let me just go back and close this again. This component is going to have, okay, we'll just put a fragment again. And let's see, let's make this component have a h1 called count. Okay, and I'm going to create a variable called count, so that way we can see it. Const count equals 0. Okay, and I'm going to make a little function, const add 1 equals, let's actually make this let. Okay, so I can change the number. So add 1 equals a function, and all the function does is just say count plus equals 1. So we're adding 1 to count. Okay, that's all it does. So now let's create a button. Click me. And I'm going to add an event to this button, but again, events in React JSX, another big difference. In HTML, you would just write on click. Not in JSX, you got to do it camel case. On click equals, and then you're going to use curly brackets and write the function in there. So add 1. Okay, so this button now will run this function when it gets clicked. Okay, notice we don't see it on the screen yet because I actually haven't used the component anywhere that's visible. Okay, so let's do that. So we've exported this component. Let's bring it in on app. So I got to import it. So import, I'm going to destructure it because I didn't use a default export. I just used a plain old export, which means it gets added to this like imaginary object. Just trust me that you're importing an object that has the thing that I exported as a property. So in that case, I want to destructure other from ./other.jsx. Okay, and then I'm going to use it right below the h2. So, and there I've used the component. Okay, so see, this just looks like I'm just using it like HTML tags. Okay, that's what makes this kind of intuitive, because everything is just, once you build a component, it's just a tag. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I did. Every time we click this button, actually, let me change this function a little bit. Let's put some curly brackets around it, because I'm going to make this a little, have this one extra step. Every time I click on this, it's adding it to 1, it's adding 1 to count, and it's going to console.log count. So we can see that count is going up. So let me Control-Shift-I, open up the console. Now let me click the function and see 1 is 1 now. 2, 3, 4. So count, the variable, is going up. The data is changing, but notice the DOM does not. Because this variable is just a standard variable. It has no, React doesn't know that this is a this should be reactive. It doesn't know it should react to changes in this data. So in order to make it reactive, to make it where React knows when this data changes, let's rebuild this component. So that way it looks different. We need to create it, we have to turn it into what's called state. The way you turn it into state is you have to declare the variable this way. So we have to say const count, set count. And again, these are names you can make up. But the idea is always like the first is like the name of the variable, and then the second thing is always set the name of the variable. And you'll see why in a moment. Equals react.useState. I'm using state. I'm using this function that's going to turn this variable into state. Okay, and then the value of it, I pass in the original value of the variable, 0. So now it starts at 0. Okay, but now instead of doing count plus equals 1, because that's not going to work because it's a constant now, so it's going to break if I do that. See, I get an error. Count is read only, because again, state variables are they're not directly accessible as far as manipulating them. They're not mutable. So that's what this set count function is for. This is the only way for us to change that piece of state. Okay, so if we want to change it, now we have to do set count. And then here I would say count plus equals 1. Okay, so what are we passing? The result of count plus 1. So now, if I click this, okay, why did it do that? Let me think about that one. Count is read only. Did I save it? Count, set count. Which line is triggering it? Line 8, set count. Oh, I see why. Because I'm putting the equals, so it's trying to assign it. Should just be count plus 1. Okay. Yeah, count plus 1. Because if I add the equals, it's going to assign the value back to the variable, which I can't do. Okay, so now if I click on it, see, it goes up by 1. But notice this still says 0. The reason is because the changing, the resetting of the state happens asynchronously. So technically, it doesn't happen right away. I think I'm going to just go on a limb here. I think I can do this. I think I can chain a dot then and just do something like this. And what it'll do is it'll wait till the change happens and then do the console log. I'm not 100% sure this will work. This is me experimenting. Nope. Nope, we can't do that. Okay, not that it matters. Okay. Cool. Because I know you could do that with in class components, but not that it matters here really. So now when I hit the button, see the state updates. The variable's updating, and because set count is changing it, because I'm using the function, it tells React that that particular component, the other component, not the whole thing. So if I go to elements here and I break everything down, okay, so here's like the H1, the button, look what changes. See, it's not the whole thing, only the H1 is updating. Okay, and that's the beauty of React. It'll identify what changed and only change that. That's called shadow DOM. Behind the scenes, React is constantly comparing what's on the screen to what it's calculating behind the scenes and only updating what needs to be updated. So that way, for sites where you're talking about like you're working with like thousands of records that are on the screen at the same time, it's not rebuilding the entire thing, only swapping out the 1 or 2 records that may have changed. And that's what kind of helps it stay fast and tight. Okay, so that's state. But a cool thing you can do is you can download the React Dev Tools. So that should be, I think it's actually, no, that's for, here we go, components. Okay, so this is the React Dev Tools, and I can see there's my component app. My component app has a prop called that's cheese. So I can see the information that app has. Now I can go to the other component, which is a child of app. So you see like in apps, the other is inside of app. So that's how it looks like here. See, app is where everything starts. And I see other is inside of app. So, but then I can see here, there's the state for the other component, and I can keep clicking on it and see it keeps changing. Okay, that's the beauty of having these dev tools. It's a Chrome extension you have to download, but worth downloading. Cool. Okay, so that's state and prop. So again, state are special variables that will trigger an update of the component when they change. Props, and again, I could pass props to other, so I can go past props and say, hey, more cheese equals Gouda. Okay, I'm actually do that as a string. And the cool thing is, like, you don't have to pass strings down. I could actually pass down, you know, JSX. So I can actually do this. I can be like, okay, I'm going to pass down more cheese is going to equal, not just equal the word Gouda, it's going to equal an H1 with Gouda in it. Okay, so more cheese, I'm passing this JSX down to other. So now what I can do is I can then put under the button my props dot more cheese. Okay, and then see we get Gouda. And see it's an H1. So you can pass anything down. You can pass down functions, you can pass down objects, you can pass down arrays. That's the beauty of this like curly bracket syntax. Okay, gives you really real flexibility in what you can pass in as props, which is super cool. Okay, I don't got too much time left, but there's a couple other cool things to know. They're like, what if you want to do something right when the component renders to the screen? Okay, what you do is you would use another hook called useEffect, react.useEffect. And what it does is that you pass it a function, and whatever this function does, it'll do the first time the screen loads. So if I see, like, I say console.log, I'm just gonna write here useEffect. Okay, but the cool thing is, now let's take a look here in my, if I hit click me to add one, okay, it updates, and then we take a look at the console. Now see, like, I'm seeing useEffect happen again and again. That's not exactly what I want this for. What I want useEffect to happen is I want it to run one time when the component loads and not run again. So to do that, I got to make sure I pass in a second argument, which is an empty array. This is referred to as the dependency list. Okay? And this is a list of variables that when they change, run this function again. Okay? So you got to make sure you pass in that second argument. Now, see, it ran once because the other component is on the screen. But now when I hit click me and the other component updates, it won't do it again. So it doesn't do it again. Okay? Now, okay, let's do this. Let's create another piece of state. Const test set test equals react.useState, and we'll just make this one start at 1. Doesn't really matter. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to add to our add1 function. We're going to say if count is greater than 10, then what we're going to do is that then we'll set test to test plus 1. Okay, so that it'll only change test once in a while. So now I'm going to add test to my dependency array. So now this function will only run when test changes. So it won't update on every click, but it'll update on the click that actually changes it. Okay, and I'm going to actually add a console log of test, so you can see that test changed. Okay, so you see right now useEffect 1, those are our 2 console logs from useEffect. Always happens right when the component loads. I click once, no change, 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 no change. Okay, this next one, it should become greater than 10. I'm not sure, I don't think it'll happen on this one. See, not yet, because of that whole asynchronous thing. But on the next one, there you go. See, that time count was greater than 10. So then test changed. And because test changed, it triggered the useEffect function again. Okay, and now going forward, it'll run every single time afterwards. Okay, so you can do some interesting stuff with that useEffect hook. Usually what you would do the useEffect is you would do like your fetch calls here. Okay, so I want to go get some data. So let's, for example, use Json placeholder. Okay, Json placeholder. It's a great place just to have like a quick place the quick URL to grab. So here we go. So let's do this fetch. So what would happen is I'm going to create another piece of state to hold the blog post, because that's what this, or a to do, because that's what this fetch gives us, is a to do. So to do set to do equals react.useState, and I'm going to just start it off as a null for now. Okay. So first, let's actually get the data. And I don't want this to happen more than once. I just want it to get the to-do and never happen again. So that's why I'm going to do it in this useEffect thing. So I'm going to fetch from the URL, fetch the to-do. Okay. Then I'm going to do a dot then, because again, a fetch is not going to give us back the information right away. First, it gives us back a buffer. So I need to take that response that's a buffer and change it into JSON data. So I'll take res.json. That turns the buffer into JSON data, which then gets returned to us in the next dot then. So now I have the to-do. It should be a to-do in there. That's what I'm expecting to get back. So then let's console.log that to-do, make sure we're actually getting it. Okay, so let me go back to our site here. And there it is. See, we are getting it. So we're getting this object. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an empty object in there, so that way it starts out as an object, and then we're going to alter this code. So that way when it's done, instead of just console logging the to-do, it's going to set to-do to the to-do. Okay, and let's just make sure that that worked. So when I go to components, and I take a look at other, I take a look at state. Okay, so see, it got the to-do. User ID. Okay. Actually, no, I will make this null. Because I want, you'll see why. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable with some JSX. So I'm going to hit const to do equals, or actually const to do JSX equals, okay, my alarm is about to go off in a second. Okay, to do JSX equals some JSX, which, well, actually first I want to test to see if my to-do actually exists yet, because again, when the component initially loads, the to-do is null. So there's this moment where the to-do doesn't exist. It's really, to us, we don't notice it because it's like faster than the human eye can process, but it's really a few milliseconds between the minute that component loads and when that fetch request resolves. So I want to make sure that we don't try to render it while it's null, because it'll throw an error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do to-do. That's called a ternary operator. So it's going to check, does to-do resolve as true? As long as it's null, it's going to resolve as false. If it's true, then what I want it to do is return an h1. Okay, and then the h1 is going to be to-do. What does the to-do have? Let's take a look in here. To-do has to-do title. Okay, so it'll be to-do.title in here. To-do.title. Okay, and if it doesn't, if it's not there yet, oh, there's the alarm. Okay. Okay, to-do.title. Then what we want to happen is for it to say h1 loading. So long as it's null, it'll say loading. And then once it's loading, so now we have this variable, we have this JSX. This expression is in this variable. I can just put this back into my code. So I'll just, over here, I'll just put in to do JSX, and that JSX will render onto the screen. Okay. Failed to compile. I have an error. Let's see why. H1. Let's see here. Module build. Oh, okay. I guess something didn't get closed right. H1. Oh, I see there's like a hanging H1 here for some reason. Let me think about why. Oh, because this should be a fragment. That's why. There we go. And there you see, there's the title. Okay, now if I refresh, so you can see for like a fraction of a second it says loading, because that's it doing the fetch. So it renders and then it re-renders. But again, the useEffect is only occurring the very first time. That's the beauty of useEffect. So to recap, we've talked about props, we've talked about state, and we've talked about the useEffect hook. Okay, that's pretty much the main tools you'll use 90% of the time when building applications with React. There's a lot of other stuff. Go check out my other videos over there at devnursery.com. Just head over to devnursery.com. Okay, and again, the tool that I made for you to quickly start up an app, it's just npx create react basic, and then whatever name you want to put in. Okay, and that'll clone the project for you. It should give you a prompt with the further directions on how to get things started. But my name's Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Go join the Slack and Discord community over there at devnursery.com. Have a great day and enjoy.